The new vaccine timeline pushed up by 2 months. So when will all Americans be able to get the vaccine? Gas prices on the rise, and what's all this business about Dr. Seuss being canceled? Wednesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for March 3rd. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
Good morning, my friend. I don't know if you noticed, but last night the sun went down 6 p.m. and I believe this weekend is daylight savings. So things are looking up. I think so. It's usually the first. I think it's the first weekend of March. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it is.
I think I'm going to just Google. It's not. It's Sunday. It's Sunday. No, it's Sunday, March 14th. March 14th. Not March.
What?
Yeah, no, it's in 2 weeks from now.
God.
Okay, I'm having flashbacks to Need to Know and one of our biggest mistakes ever. And it was in the infancy of when we started writing the newsletter. And luckily we did not, I think we maybe had like less than 1,000 people, but I incorrectly wrote that Sunday was daylight saving, or the end of whatever it was, that push forward or spring back. And a bunch of people wrote in, and we had to issue our first correction because it was like actionable information.
That's a bad mistake.
Yes, so I want to just be quite clear. Daylight saving is not Sunday. It's in 2 weeks.
Okay. Apologies for that. By the way, before we get to the news, I just had to mention my friend Zach, who is one of our new obsessive listeners. He said that he took issue with you yesterday, saying that grocery shopping in the suburbs is a pain. Because he was like, when grocery shopping in the city is really a production, and he was just saying, like, grocery shopping in the suburbs is great. You got a car, you got the parking lot. You don't have to trudge blocks with like 4 or 5 bags. So
you know what, he makes a really good point, actually. And not only is supermarket shopping is it easier? It's much more pleasurable because the aisles are a lot bigger. So you know what? I stand corrected on that.
Okay.
But I will not be made to feel guilty about, ordering it in.
No, and I didn't mean to make you feel guilty yesterday. I'm sorry if I did.
Okay, let's get to some news here. Texas is going to be dropping its mask mandates and allow all businesses to reopen without restrictions next week, despite the CDC director warning governors not to relax restrictions just yet, as cases and deaths appear to be plateauing at a high level. Mississippi followed suit, but Texas is by far the biggest state to kind of try to go back to normal. Meanwhile, President Biden says there will now be enough vaccines for all U.S. adults by the end of May, which is 2 months earlier than the previous timetable. Part of the reason for that, the White House brokered a wartime-like deal between rivals Merck and Johnson & Johnson. So this means that Merck is going to help make that Johnson & Johnson shot. This is huge, Carlo. In terms of just this partnership, American companies that are rivals working together for this, and 2 months in terms of that timeline is huge.
Absolutely. Before we get to that, though, we just got to talk about Texas for a second. So, Texas ranks 49th in the country in vaccine distribution. That's according to the Bloomberg Vaccine Tracker. Less than 7% of their population has been fully vaccinated. So one might think that Governor Abbott would be trying to spend his time trying to get those numbers up. But, Texas is going to Texas, right? It's not really the easing of restrictions to me that's actually even that troubling, because from all of the contemporaneous things that I've heard out of Texas, they're more or less open. I think there's like some restrictions on like indoor seating a little bit, but it's not like they're in some sort of big lockdown. But the mask mandate, it's so irresponsible. We're so close. It's not that hard to wear a mask in public. It's like literally the least you can do. It's not hurting anybody. It's not causing any businesses to go under. It's like, we're at like the 25th mile here, and we're just like, we're so close. Can we just stick to it? It's like so frustrating.
Well, the mask mandate, it's a way to also protect workers. Just back to food shopping, right? If you're a cashier or you're somebody who works in a supermarket, you're safer when the customers are wearing masks. And it's not right. It's not fair to frontline workers. It's just not. But I like the marathon metaphor here, and I'm glad you used it in terms of being at the 25th mile. I think it pertains. One doctor on Twitter was saying it's like this is basically like if you're running a marathon, you're at mile 20 and you're like, you know what, I'm going to take my shoes off and I'm going to eat a plate of spaghetti. I'm a marathon runner, right? I've run the marathon, the New York City Marathon 3 times, and I can tell you, you are not going to finish that marathon if you do that.
Right.
So we are so close. It's just, I think the messaging is off. It's like, this is when you're just like double down on the safety measures. Because this is when, let's get this virus under control, let's get everyone vaccinated, and let's have the best summer ever.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with you. I think hospitalizations, are really the most important metric, I think, in terms of telling you where things stand, either nationally or in a state at any given moment, right? Case data, it's a little bit noisy. Deaths, as we know, are lagging. Hospitalizations are really what you want to look at. So Texas hospitalizations, about 5,600. That's the best they've been since October, but it's not particularly low. So, to your point, it's just like we're just easing up like a little too soon. But, back to what you were saying about the other big story, and Texas is sort of getting in the way of that really good news. So Biden basically putting down this marker of Memorial Day, the end of May. And this Merck Johnson & Johnson partnership, you just said it. This is historic. Businesses don't make their number one competitors' products for them. That's never happened in our lives. I don't think it's happened since World War II. So you really do love to see it. And just talk about American business stepping up, like amazing. And the floodgates are really starting to open. I'm hearing about people now in my sort of age cohort in certain industries who are getting their shots or have certain pre-existing conditions getting their shots, or at least their appointments. More people are emailing us every day, Jill, talking about how, their stories. And it's just fantastic. I know that I'm a broken record here. And, last summer, everyone was complaining that I was being such a Debbie Downer about everything. And now I think people are going to start complaining that I'm being too optimistic. But these vaccines are really the closest thing we have ever seen in our lifetimes to a miracle. And they're not a miracle, right? They're the product of hard work and science. I'm not saying that it's some sort of like gift from God, but it really is. It's so remarkable and it's so amazing to be a part of, right?
I agree, but I do think, so I will play Debbie Downer here. I do think we're underestimating how many people are not going to get this vaccine. Right now, this is still a supply problem, but this will very quickly become a demand problem. And I think a lot of it has to do with the messaging. And I don't want to point fingers at the media or the CDC or whatever, but we got to stop focusing on these vaccines not being effective against certain variants or what you can't do once you're vaccinated. And we have to start talking about what you can do and how life gets better and how you could sleep better at night and you have one less worry. And I will give you an example about what you can do. My parents, who are fully vaccinated now, got to babysit for my daughter last weekend for the first time in months. And they had a sleepover with my niece, also babysitting for her.
Right.
And that's what life's about, right? And so I think we just have to, again, stop focusing on why Johnson & Johnson's X amount % effective and blah, blah, blah. Let's not give people a reason to not get the vaccine.
Yeah,
we
totally.
should be actually pointing out, to your point, that this is miraculous that we're a year into this pandemic with 3 effective vaccines currently.
And think about that, right? Your parents babysitting your daughter. Think about the effects of that, right? That's great for them. It's great for your daughter. It's great for you guys, right? All of that just because these 2 people were able to get vaccinated. Amazing.
No, my husband and I dropped my daughter off, and we looked at each other. We're like, what do we even do right now? We were like, do we just drive around with the music on? We're like, we don't know how to even handle a minute of free time. It was kind of bizarre. All right, switching gears, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a case about voting restrictions in Arizona, one of the first major tests of how the new 6-3 conservative majority on the court is going to rule on issues related to voting rights. Based on the questions asked, the justices seemed inclined to uphold 2 of the Arizona restrictions, the requirement that Election Day ballots accidentally cast at the wrong precinct get tossed, and also a law that makes it a crime to collect and drop off absentee ballots on someone else's behalf unless they are a family member or a caregiver.
The court's decision in this case, it's going to be probably a landmark. It will affect what voting laws can be challenged under the Voting Rights Act, and it will basically determine the fate of many state laws that we don't even that aren't even in effect yet. There's a huge Republican effort right now to tighten voting restrictions. It's underway in states across the country, especially laws that disproportionately affect minority voters. That's a bad thing if you believe that we should be making it easier for folks to vote rather than more difficult. But I thought that the new Justice Amy Coney Barrett, she asked in the arguments yesterday, she asked the GOP lawyer in this Arizona case, quoting her, "Why is the RNC in this case?" And that lawyer basically said that striking down restrictions on voting, quote, puts us at a competitive disadvantage relative to Democrats. I just thought it was like, that's sort of like one of those examples of saying the quiet part out loud. But yeah, we'll see. But this is something that we got to keep an eye on. It's going to have really big impacts on elections to come. And it's part of, just the aftermath of all of the madness related to the last election we had.
Sticking with politics for a second, President Biden's nominee for budget chief now being withdrawn. This is the first casualty of his presidency. Neera Tanden will not go forward as the nominee for director of the OMB after it became clear that the Senate didn't have the votes to confirm her, although Biden says he plans to give Tanden another job in his administration.
This woman, if you're not familiar with her, she's a former Clinton advisor, sort of a left-wing think tank person, but she's also at least she was a prolific tweeter, and she was criticized by Republicans and even some Democrats for a history of sort of like vitriolic and combative tweets that criticized Republicans, but also the Democratic establishment. And, once Joe Manchin said that he wasn't going to support her confirmation, it was lights out. But they kind of dragged it out for reasons I don't know. But this is a great example of why you should never tweet.
100%. And it's funny.
Just don't do it.
So John Steinberg, who's our boss here at Cheddar, I think it was at one of our all hands or something, we were talking about our social media policy. And he was like, if you're writing a tweet or a social media post and there's even for 1 second you're thinking, maybe I shouldn't write this. Like, is this going to be taken the wrong way? He's like, don't write it. There's zero benefit to you in writing it, and it can only come back to hurt you. And I actually like hear his voice in my head when I go. And Dr. Seuss, we're going to talk about Dr. Seuss a little bit later in this podcast. At 3 a.m. could not sleep. I could not sleep last night for whatever reason. I was scrolling Twitter and I was about to write a tweet and I was like, it's going to come back to haunt me. I'm not going to write it. Anyway.
That's the right policy.
But I think that you make a good point. Like if there's one moral to this story, I think it's that. Let's talk a little business here. As expected, gas prices rising just about everywhere 2 weeks after that freak weather storm in Texas knocked out significant domestic oil capacity. The national average rose for the 8th week in a row. So gas prices now averaging $2.72 a gallon, according to Gas Buddy. Prices are as high as $4 a gallon in Orange County, California. It was not that long ago, Carlo, when these oil producers literally could not give their oil away, if you remember in the height of the pandemic.
Yeah. That was one of those crazy things that happened last spring. Yeah. God, there was some crazy stuff that went down in this last year, right? God, man, wow. Yeah, so OPEC, the big OPEC meeting is tomorrow. They will decide whether to increase supply to the global market as demand starts to creep up, which makes sense, right? People are starting to get out more. They're starting to travel more. And it's ahead of Memorial Day, which is they call the official start to the driving season. I've always thought that was such a sort of like weird term. Like, what is the driving season exactly, right? I guess people like go travel more during the summer, but I don't know. It's just that always struck me as sort of a weird term.
As a former local news reporter who was on the side of the road for many a Memorial Day weekend reporting on traffic, I can tell you, I have always thought it was such a bizarre. It's a media term that nobody in their right mind would ever use in real life.
It's like, oh, it's Memorial Day, time to get in the car and just, hit the gas.
Guys, it's the start of driving season. Right. Maybe like it's the start of beach season, but I'm totally with you. SoundCloud is drastically changing how it compensates artists in the face of sorry, I'm just giggling at my old life and and how corny I was.
I remember those days. Yeah, those were classics.
Okay, on to, again, some more business news. SoundCloud drastically changing how it compensates artists in the face of criticism that the current music licensing system is grossly inequitable in the streaming age. SoundCloud will now direct royalty fees only to the artists that subscribers listen to. So if there's some indie band that you stream on SoundCloud, the royalties from your streams will now go directly to that band. Spotify, Apple, and other platforms use a different type of system in which royalty payments are put into a big pot and then dished out every month based on streams, leading to big windfalls for stars like Taylor Swift and Drake, but almost nothing for less popular musicians.
Yeah, this is a pretty big deal. So the average Spotify payout, I looked this up yesterday, it is 0.006 cents per song stream. That's about half a penny, right? So every time you play a song, that you generate half a penny in revenue. So a musician living in the United States would need 3 million streams a year to have a gross income of $12,000, which would be just above the poverty line if their entire income just came from streaming. I thought that was an amazing statistic. 3 million streams. You think that's like that's a lot, right? And you're only making $12K off that. So first of all, it shows you just how important live music is to if you're a musician these days. And obviously there is no live music right now, so a lot of people are really hurting. But it's also, to your point, it's really inequitable, right? I mean, you can make a ton of money if you're one of these, top pop stars that are getting like 1 billion song streams. But if you're just some like local garage band or DJ or something, you really gotta get a lot of people listening to your music. So this could be sort of like a watershed moment in this sort of in the streaming business. We'll have to watch.
Look, technology has been a blessing and a curse for the music industry. It's given us YouTube, which has allowed for us to learn about some artists who never would have been able to get record labels many years ago. But at the same time, it's killed a main source of income, which is album sales. So
that's a really good point. And it's
no, go finish.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's also made it really much easier to record and produce music, right? It used to be you have to have you have to go into a recording studio and have like a whole production team. And, now you can pretty much do it on your computer.
Look at the song that driver's license that your daughter already is kicking her feet to.
She loves that song.
Yeah, I mean that is an example of a song that was born on TikTok.
Exactly.
And Carlo, finally, the business that runs Dr. Seuss's estate will stop publishing 6 of the famed children author's books because of racially insensitive imagery. The books are And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, If I Ran the Zoo, McKilligott's Pool, excuse me if I mispronounced that, On Beyond Zebra, The Cat's Quizzer, and Scrambled Eggs Super. Dr. Seuss Enterprises says it made the decision based on a 2019 study that found Seuss's work included, quote, Orientalist tropes and anti-blackness.
If you look at the top bestseller spots on Amazon right now, Dr. Seuss books currently take up 8 of the 10. Pretty remarkable. Some of them are selling for thousands of dollars on eBay. So this yesterday became the perfect grist for the culture war, right? It's like it was just like mainline that into Fox News and it's like the biggest story of the day. So I just want to be clear about something. I think that you could argue with this decision, but it's not the result of some like woke cancel culture mob. Books go out of print all the time, and there's a big difference between an online campaign of social justice warriors to trying to end somebody's career, which I absolutely despise, by the way. But there's a big difference between that and a book publisher taking some of its second-rate titles out of print, and these are not like the top Dr. Seuss books by any stretch. But it all gets mixed up into this cancel culture debate. It's really it really annoys me, and there's just a lot of nuance I think that's not really getting through in like sort of the mainstream outlets.
I completely agree, but the cancel culture debate here I think is real because there are a lot of people that are calling for Dr. Seuss to be canceled. Which I can give you an example. Like my daughter had Dr. Seuss Day yesterday at school, where they all wore funny socks, except of course for my daughter who refuses to be a refuses to conform, Carlo. She's like, I will not do it. She doesn't dress up on dress-up day. She's like, leave me alone. I'm doing what I want to do.
I respect that.
I do too. At 2.5, she knows her own mind. However, so there are other districts out there that have been like, we're not doing Dr. Seuss Day because of all this stuff. I don't agree with that. I think, like, take these books out of print and let this be a learning experience. But Dr. Seuss, he's a beloved children's book author who taught a lot of kids how to read. Look, I was trying to figure out, for me, like, what I was trying to do a comparison. And Shakespeare, okay, you've got The Merchant of Venice, which is clearly anti-Semitic. I still think kids should read Shakespeare in high school and read Romeo and Juliet and read his literature and maybe even learn about why that book is anti-Semitic.
Huckleberry Finn's another great example there.
What did you say?
Huckleberry Finn's another great example there. Like, I think that there's some school districts that have stopped reading that. That was a really formative book for me in whenever I read that, like, 9th grade, even though they Twain used the N-word repeatedly. But yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. I think that there's sort of like two aspects of the debate, right? There's like businesses make decisions, based on sales and stuff. But I think that, so like for this, for instance, I would not be down with libraries taking Dr. Seuss books off shelves, for instance. But I don't think that I don't have an issue with like the Dr. Seuss company like stopping publishing them, if that makes sense.
No, or libraries taking those specific books off the shelf, right? I mean, I get that. I totally understand why these images are offensive in some of these books, but again, like, they're understanding the time and the context and when they were written. Think of, everyone has, whether they want to admit it or not, a grandparent who maybe made an off-color remark here or there. You didn't, like, not go to their house anymore. You just, you learn from, like, it is what it is. There's things that just don't fly anymore, rightfully so. And we shouldn't, that doesn't mean the person needs to be canceled. Think about how many kids are growing up. I read my daughter a Dr. Seuss book almost every day, and she loves it. Like, the way that he figured out words that rhyme, and I was listening to a lot of teachers talk about it on social media as well. It's effective. These books are bestsellers for a reason. They're very, very effective in teaching kids to read, to rhyme, and they're enjoyable. So anyway, I'll leave it there. But
yeah, it's a hot debate. I think that there's good arguments on sort of both sides of it. It's just like, I just hate when it gets sort of like mashed together in this thing.
So I think Fox News should have been covering the culture, Dr. Seuss being canceled yesterday when Joe Biden was announcing that the timeline for vaccines is getting speed up. No, I think that I agree with you. I think everything gets kind of caught up in this, but
there's a debate to be had for sure.
Yes, and tell us if we're wrong, right? Like, I enjoy it. I think it is a worthy debate. So email us and tell us why we're wrong here or right. Okay.
Need2Know at cheddar.com.
Carlo at cheddar.com. Okay, that is what you need to know for Wednesday, March 3rd. And Sunday is not the end of daylight saving or the start of it.
Thank you for that. Bye.